A summer sun bleeds gold across a pristine pool. A champagne flute clinks, but the sound is swallowed by raucous laughter. A figure watches from the shadows, her face a mask of calm fury. She raises a small black remote, a single deliberate press of a button. The water, a perfect turquoise a moment ago, begins to churn. It isn't a ripple. It's a scream. Lena sat on the edge of the diving board, her bare feet dangling in the cool, clear water. The afternoon sun was a warm blanket on her skin, and the scent of chlorine and freshly cut grass was a simple, perfect perfume. A worn paperback rested on her lap, but she hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes. This was her sanctuary. After the divorce, after the endless battles for legal fees and the quiet, crushing emptiness of the house, this pool was the one thing that still felt like her own. It was a tangible turquoise promise that she could rebuild, piece by piece, starting with an afternoon of quiet. A splash shattered the silence. Lena's head snapped up. From behind the manicured hedge that separated her yard from the Oakhaven estates, a small blonde head emerged, followed by another. 2 little boys, no older than 7, were giggling as they scaled the low fence. Lena recognized them instantly. The Thompson boys from 3 doors down. "Hey, boys," she called out, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't just come in here." One of the boys, a round-faced kid with a mop of blonde hair, peered over the fence. "My mom said we could swim." "She knows you." A chill ran down Lena's spine. She knew that look. It was the same look of entitlement she had seen on her ex-husband's face, on the faces of his lawyers. The look of people who believed the world was a buffet laid out for their pleasure, and they were simply helping themselves. Before she could form a response, the hedge rustled violently. A large inflatable flamingo was shoved through a gap in the foliage, followed by the rest of the Thompson family. The mother, a woman named Sharon, with a face full of aggressive makeup and a designer visor perched on her head, strode into the yard as if she owned the place. Her husband, Gary, followed, carrying a cooler that looked heavy enough to hold a small glacier. "Oh, you're here," Sharon said, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that was worse than venom. "The kids were just so hot. We told them to come on over. You don't mind, right? It's a neighborly thing to do." Lena slid off the diving board, the pebbles of the pool deck cold against her feet. "Actually, I do mind. I'm sorry, but this is a private space." Sharon laughed, a shrill, unpleasant sound. She set the flamingo down, her eyes scanning Lena's backyard with a look of critical disdain. "Private? Sweetie, we live in a community. The pool is a shared resource, practically. You have it, and we don't. It just makes sense." "It doesn't make sense, Sharon. This is my property. I pay for the upkeep, the chemicals, everything." Gary, a lanky man with a perpetually bored expression, opened the cooler and started pulling out cans of beer. "Don't be a buzzkill, Lena. It's just a swim." The boys, emboldened by their parents' presence, were already jumping into the shallow end, splashing wildly. Their screams of delight echoed off the high fence, a sound that felt like nails on a chalkboard to Lena's frayed nerves. This wasn't an honest mistake. This was a hostile takeover. "Get your kids out of my pool," Lena said, her voice dropping. The civility was gone. Sharon's smile vanished, replaced by a hard, cruel line. "What did you just say to me?" "I said, get your kids out of my pool. And you and your husband. This isn't a community center. It's my home. I want you to leave. Now." Sharon took a step closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper meant to sting. "You know, we heard about the divorce. Heard Mark left you with nothing but this house and a mountain of debt. It's a shame, really. You'd think a woman on her own would be a little more accommodating to the people who still have their families intact." The words hit Lena like a physical blow. The vulnerability she had been so carefully guarding was suddenly exposed, a raw, throbbing wound. Her jaw tightened and her fists clenched at her sides. She felt a tremor of fury, a hot liquid rage that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. This wasn't about the pool anymore. This was about respect, about dignity. As if to punctuate her point, one of the Thompson boys, chasing his brother, slipped on the deck and fell hard. The sound of his wail was immediate and piercing. Gary, who had just popped open a beer, dropped the can. A geyser of foam erupted across the deck, coating a small ceramic garden gnome Lena had had since she was a child. It was a sentimental piece, one of the few things her late mother had given her before she passed. "You're an idiot, Kevin," Sharon snapped, rushing to her son, her voice suddenly high and panicky. "See what happens when you're not careful?" She ignored the gnome, the beer, and the fact that she had just called her child an idiot. The spilled beer was the final straw. It was a perfect, frothy metaphor for how they were treating her life. A careless spill, a mess to be ignored and left for her to clean up. Lena took a deep, shaky breath. When she spoke, her voice was low and even, the rage carefully banked, a fire hidden just beneath the surface. "You know what? You're right. My mistake. My apologies. The kids are having a good time. Just make sure you don't track a bunch of dirt into the house when you leave." Sharon's expression shifted to one of smug triumph. "See? Was that so hard? We'll be sure to stop by more often." Lena offered a small, chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you will." As the afternoon wore on, the Thompsons grew louder, more entitled. They turned up a portable speaker, blaring pop music, and scattered empty chip bags and beer cans across the lawn. The water, once a perfect sheet of glass, was now murky with sunscreen and a film of God knows what. Lena retreated to the patio, watching them from behind the sliding glass door. She pulled out her phone and started typing, her thumbs flying across the screen. Her eyes, fixed on the chaotic scene in her yard, were no longer filled with quiet fury. They were cold, calculating, and dangerously serene. The Thompson family, now joined by two more kids who had apparently been invited, were engaged in a loud game of Marco Polo. Sharon was stretched out on a lounge chair, sunglasses pushed down on her nose, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. She was the queen of the neighborhood, and this was her new summer court. Then, the music abruptly cut out. Gary Thompson, standing in the middle of the yard, looked down at his phone with a puzzled frown. "The Wi-Fi's out," he said. "No, it's not," Sharon said from her lounge chair. "I'm still getting a signal." Suddenly, her face went white. She snatched up her phone, her thumb mashing the screen. Nothing, not a single bar. Her husband's phone was the same. Their kids, who had been streaming a cartoon on a tablet, were now staring at a blank screen. Lena, watching from the kitchen, took a sip of iced tea. She had just finished the last line of code. It had taken a little research, a little digging, and a little help from a friend who still owed her a favor from her days as a freelance cybersecurity analyst. The Wi-Fi wasn't out. She had simply changed the password on her network, the one that a dozen families in the Oak Haven Estates neighborhood had been stealing from her for years. And then she had used a script to broadcast a signal under her network's name that was so strong, so stable it had automatically redirected their devices, including their smart home devices and security systems, to a new, unsecured network she had just created. A network she now had complete control over. A new kind of panic was starting to set in on the Thompsons' faces, one that had nothing to do with a swimming pool. The kind of panic that comes when the digital ground beneath you suddenly gives way. Sharon's phone, which she had been using as a hotspot, was now useless. Her husband's security camera feed from his business, which he had been monitoring, was now a dead screen. Lena looked at the Thompsons. Still splashing in her pool, still unaware of the silent, invisible coup that had just taken place. She smiled to herself, ingenue. The sudden dead silence was a physical weight in the humid afternoon air. Gary Thompson was the first to speak, his voice a low grumble. Must be a local outage. Sharon, however, was no fool. Her face was a canvas of rising dread. She had a deep, visceral reliance on her connected world. Her smart home, her security cameras, her carefully curated social media presence. It was her kingdom. And now the gates were slammed shut. "Check the other devices, Gary, the kid's tablet, my watch." Gary's thumb swiped furiously at his phone, his frown deepening. "No, it's not an outage. It's connected to a network, but it's not working. Nothing's loading." He looked up, his eyes meeting Lena's through the sliding glass door. A flicker of suspicion crossed his face, but he dismissed it. Why would she do this? She was a victim, a mess. This level of technical sabotage was beyond her. From the kitchen, Lena watched them, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She held her phone, the screen still showing the line of code she had executed. It was so simple, so elegant. She hadn't just changed the password. She had created a new, unsecured network with the same name as hers, a classic man-in-the-middle trap. Their smart devices, programmed to connect to the strongest known signal, had instantly switched over. But this new network was a digital cul-de-sac. It had no internet access. Their phones, their kid's tablet, Sharon's smartwatch, they were all a part of a fake, useless network, cut off from the world they depended on. And the remote in her hand was a different kind of weapon entirely. The boys, unaware of the digital crisis, started whining. "Mom, my cartoon's frozen." "It's boring." "Just play!" Sharon snapped, her usual composure cracking. The veneer of sweet, neighborly superiority was flaking off, revealing the ugly, panicked woman beneath. "Gary, do something! Call the cable company." "I can't. The phone won't connect. Use your data." "It's not switching over. It's stuck on the Wi-Fi." This was better than she had imagined. Lena had expected them to be annoyed, maybe even frustrated. But the raw, existential terror in Sharon's eyes was a new kind of satisfaction. The woman who had scoffed at Lena's sad little life was now paralyzed by its lack of digital connection. This was a form of poetic justice. Sharon, a master of a carefully crafted online presence, a woman who uploaded a daily stream of flawless selfies and humble brags, was now a ghost. Her new post about her impromptu pool party with neighbors was still in draft form, unable to upload. She couldn't text her friends, couldn't check her social feeds, couldn't see the live feed from her security cameras. "This is your fault," Sharon hissed at Gary, her voice low and venomous. "You're always messing with the network settings." "Me? You're the one with all the smart devices. The smart coffee maker, the smart thermostat, the smart garage door opener." "Oh God, the garage door." Gary's eyes widened, a new wave of panic washing over him. He used a smart app to open and close his garage from work. What if it was stuck open? Or worse, what if it was stuck shut and his new custom-built convertible was trapped inside? The mounting stress was a palpable thing, a cloud of anxiety that hung over them as they stood, dripping and helpless, in the middle of Lena's backyard. They were an island in a sea of technology they no longer controlled, their usual bravado replaced by an ugly, frantic desperation. Lena decided it was time to move to the next phase. She opened the back door, stepping out onto the patio. The cool air from the house was a refreshing contrast to the stagnant humidity of the afternoon. She had a small, inconspicuous black remote in her hand, the kind used for a gate or a car alarm. It was a bluff, of course. The real show was already starting. Her thumb hovered over the single red button. "Everything okay out here?" she asked, her voice calm and a little too sweet. Sharon whipped her head around, her eyes narrowing. "No, everything is not okay. My Wi-Fi is down, my phone is a brick, and my kids are screaming. And it all happened the second we got here." "Really?" Lena said, her tone full of fake sympathy. "That's so strange. My network is working just fine." The accusation in Sharon's eyes was now a certainty. "You did this. You messed with our signal." Lena feigned hurt. "Why would I do that, Sharon? I'm just trying to enjoy my quiet afternoon." A quiet afternoon that, by the way, is no longer quiet. And my beautiful, perfect pool is now, well, just look at it. She gestured with her free hand at the water, which was now a soupy mess of sunscreen, leaves, and who knew what else. The Thompson boys, sensing the shift in mood, began to fight over a pool noodle. A splash of water, thick with a fine film of dirt, hit Sharon's arm. She screamed in disgust. That was her cue. Lena pressed the button on the remote. A silent, deliberate click. For a moment, nothing happened. Sharon opened her mouth to deliver another cutting remark. But then, a subtle change occurred in the water. It wasn't a ripple. It was a color. From the deepest parts of the pool, a vibrant chemical blue began to spread. It was a shocking, unnatural hue, the kind that promised nothing good. "What is that?" Gary asked, his voice a low whisper. The color didn't stop. It deepened and spread, seeping into every corner of the pool. In less than 10 seconds, the pristine turquoise water had become a lurid, toxic cobalt. The kids, who had been splashing a moment ago, now stared down at their own skin, which was turning a sickly shade of blue. "My swimsuit!" Sharon shrieked, looking down at her expensive white bikini. It was now stained with an electric, eye-searing blue. The chemical, a harmless but incredibly potent dye, had reacted with the water. The dye was a new cutting-edge technology Lena had been working on with her cybersecurity firm's R&D department. It was a smart pigment, and its molecules had been activated by a specific, ultrasonic frequency that only the remote could emit. The Thompsons scrambled out of the pool, a cacophony of panicked screams and splashes. They stood on the deck, dripping and panicked, their bodies a ghastly shade of blue. "You're going to pay for this!" Sharon screamed, her voice a ragged, furious rasp. Lena's smile was gone. Her face was calm, cold, and utterly terrifying. She held up her phone. "My friends at the firm tell me it's completely harmless. The dye will fade in about a week. But you should probably get out of my pool before I activate the sonic algae bloom treatment." Sharon's eyes widened. The threat was a brilliant stroke of genius, and Lena knew she'd do the research to see that it was real. But what came next was not about a chemical reaction. It was about something far more valuable to Sharon Thompson, her public image. Just as the Thompsons reached the gate, dripping and humiliatingly blue, Sharon's phone chimed with a notification. It was from her husband's security camera app, which had just reconnected to the Wi-Fi. It was an image, a close-up, high-resolution picture of their neighbor's garage, which had been left wide open. But the image was not of a garage. It was a close-up picture of the Thompsons' family dog, a perfect, pristine golden retriever, standing in the middle of a perfectly pristine living room with a single, perfectly aimed stream of urine coming from its body and landing on a priceless oriental rug. The camera had been turned to face the interior of their home and had captured the whole thing. Sharon screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound. The perfect pet in the perfect house, now a symbol of utter chaos. Lena watched them go, leaving a trail of blue footprints on her pristine white concrete. She had taken back her sanctuary. But she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The real game was now fully underway. Sharon's scream was a raw, primal sound, a perfect sonic expression of her world crumbling. The image on her husband's phone was a monument to her worst fear, public imperfection. It wasn't just the urine-stained rug, an heirloom from her great-grandmother. It was the fact that a camera, an eye she believed was a personal guardian, had captured this private catastrophe. The dog, a fluffy golden symbol of their perfect family life, was now a vandal. The priceless rug, a testament to their refined taste, was a toilet. Her carefully constructed facade was cracking, and she didn't know how deep the fissures ran. "What is that?" Gary's voice was a panicked whisper. He squinted at the image, then looked back at their house, his mouth agape. "It's a live feed, Gary. She has control of our cameras!" Sharon shrieked, her blue-stained hands shaking as she shoved the phone back at him. She looked up at the Thompsons' home, the garage door still gaping like a broken jaw. The idea that someone could be watching, could be seeing this chaos unfold, was a violation so profound it eclipsed even the humiliating blue dye on her skin. Lena stood on her patio, the setting sun glinting off the phone in her hand. She watched them, a small vindicated smile on her face. The image of the dog was no accident. A little digital manipulation, a simple script to control the camera's angle and trigger a notification. She had used her knowledge not to destroy, but to expose, to show them what they truly were, a mess waiting to happen. The two Thompson boys, now out of the pool and shivering, were a ghastly blue color, like Smurfs who had just lost a fight with a lawnmower. Their frantic parents ignored them, consumed by the digital nightmare Lena had unleashed. "You're a monster," Sharon hissed, her voice a low, furious growl. "You'll regret this. I'll call the police. I'll call the HOA. You can't get away with this." "Go ahead, Sharon," Lena said, her voice smooth and even. "Call them. Tell them you were trespassing on my property in my private pool and that you stole my Wi-Fi, and when I asked you to leave, you refused. Then you can show them your..." Interesting new shade, the words were a bucket of ice water. Sharon and Gary exchanged a look of sheer, helpless panic. They had no legal high ground. They had broken the law first. They were trapped, blue, and utterly exposed. As the Thompsons scrambled to gather their deflated flamingo and their kids, another notification buzzed on Gary's phone. He looked down, his face going slack with horror. It was a text message, but not from anyone in his contacts. It was a link to a private group chat he was in with his golf buddies. The message was a video. No, she wouldn't, he stammered, his fingers fumbling. But she had. The video was a perfectly edited 2-minute montage. The first 30 seconds showed the Thompsons crashing Lena's pool. Their arrogant laughter and Sharon's condescending remarks to Lena. The next minute and a half was a silent, beautifully composed shot of the Thompsons' golden retriever, caught in the act of desecrating the rug, set to a classical score. The video ended with a title card, in elegant script, The Thompson Way. Gary didn't need to click the link to know what it was. Lena had hacked his group chat and sent it to all of his friends. He knew with a bone-deep certainty that by the time they got home, the video would be a viral sensation among his social circle. This wasn't just a simple prank. This was a calculated assassination of their social standing. As they fled the yard, their shame a tangible thing, Sharon's phone, which was still stuck on the fake network, suddenly buzzed to life. The screen flickered, then a new notification popped up. It was a message sent to all of her contacts, to her social media followers, and to the parent listserv she ran. The text was simple, brutal, and damning. Due to recent events, our family is taking an unscheduled digital detox. Please do not contact us. We have received our just deserts. The message was signed, The Thompsons, a.k.a. the Smurfs, but it wasn't from them. Sharon stared at the screen, her face contorting in a silent scream of rage and despair. She had lost. Lena hadn't just humiliated her. She had turned Sharon's own platform against her, broadcasting her shame for all to see. The Thompsons left the yard, their trail of blue footprints a damning testament to their failed invasion. Lena stood on her patio, watching them disappear into the twilight. A powerful calm settled over her. It was over. The game was won. She had taken back her sanctuary. But as she went to turn back to the house, a sudden motion caught her eye. A figure, barely visible in the fading light, stood in the shadows of the neighbor's yard, holding a phone. They weren't watching the Thompsons. The small, dark rectangle in the neighbor's hand was not just a phone. It was an eye, an unblinking digital eye, and it was pointed at her. Lena's triumphant smile evaporated, replaced by a cold, leaden weight in the pit of her stomach. The victory she had just savored, the delicious vindication of watching the Thompsons flee, now tasted like ash. All this time she had been playing God, pulling the strings of a digital puppet show in which she was the hero. Now she was the star of someone else's screen. She didn't move. Her body was a statue on the patio, every nerve on high alert. The figure in the shadows of the yard next door was tall, slender, and held his phone with a casual ease that suggested he wasn't just checking a text. He wasn't looking at the Thompsons' house. He was looking at hers. He was watching her. The paranoia was a physical chill seeping into her skin. Who was this? Another neighbor? Someone she hadn't seen before? The Thompsons had friends, people who might want to exact their own brand of revenge. But this felt different. This wasn't a panicked amateur response. This was a silent, calculated observation, a professional surveillance. She backed away slowly, her hand fumbling for the handle of the sliding glass door. The figure raised a hand, a single, deliberate gesture. He wasn't waving. He was beckoning. Lena's mind raced, a frantic whirl of possibilities and dangers. The blue dye on her hand seemed to burn. She had just used her considerable skills to commit a series of felonies: trespassing, destruction of property, unauthorized access to a private network, and digital harassment. All of it captured, not by a blundering neighbor, but by someone who knew what they were looking for. She pulled the door open and stepped inside, her eyes still locked on the figure. He lowered his hand and slowly, deliberately, walked into the golden light of the street lamp. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, with a shock of silver hair and a face etched with 1,000 silent battles. He wore a crisp polo shirt and a pair of perfectly pressed slacks, a neighbor she had never seen before. Her mind screamed with questions. How long had he been there? How did he get access to her camera? Was he an accomplice of the Thompsons? Or something worse? Her own security system, a state-of-the-art system she had installed herself, was a source of pride. It was her digital fortress. The only way he could have breached it was if he was a ghost, a master of his craft. A notification chimed on her phone. She snatched it up, her hands trembling. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message was a single word. "We need to talk." Her heart hammered against her ribs. He wasn't just watching. He was communicating. He was toying with her. Lena's fear quickly turned to a cold, hard resolve. She wasn't a victim anymore. She had taken back her life from a cruel ex-husband, and she had just humiliated a family of bullies. She would not be intimidated by a man in a polo shirt. She was a professional. She would beat him at his own game. She went to her home office, a small room filled with humming servers and glowing monitors, her own digital cockpit. She pulled up the log of her security system, every detail meticulously recorded. She ran a diagnostic, searching for any anomalies, any trace of a backdoor, any sign of a remote access. Nothing. It was a perfectly clean system. Her own code, her own network. It was impossible. He couldn't have gotten in. A new text message arrived. This one was a question. "Do you enjoy Russian history?" Followed by a link to a Wikipedia article about the siege of Leningrad. The article was a non sequitur, a seemingly random act of digital stalking. She ignored it, her focus entirely on her system logs. She wasn't an amateur. She had worked for a high-profile cybersecurity firm, a job she had walked away from when her marriage had fallen apart. She was an architect of firewalls and a specialist in digital forensics. The man in the polo shirt was a mystery. He had to be a ghost in her machine, a digital wraith with no trace. Suddenly, her computer monitor flickered. A new window popped up, and a line of code began to type itself, as if by an unseen hand. It was a simple, elegant script. It was a script that showed her the back door she had just exploited in the Thompson system. And then, it typed a new line, a line she had never seen before. It was a script that showed her the precise digital fingerprint she had left on the Thompsons' network, a digital trail she had thought was untraceable. Her blood ran cold. He hadn't just gotten into her system. He was showing her the flaws in her own work. He was not a bully. He was a tutor. A dark, terrifying tutor. The text messages started coming in one after the other. They weren't threats. They were simple, concise statements about her life, things he could only have known by watching her cameras. You prefer chamomile tea at night. You spend an hour by the pool every morning. You have an ugly chip in your kitchen tile right by the pantry door. The last one was a punch to the gut. She had never noticed the chip. She ran to the kitchen, her heart in her throat. There it was, a tiny, ugly chip in the corner of a tile she had walked over 1,000 times. He was not just watching her. He was seeing her. All of her flaws, all of her vulnerabilities, laid bare for a complete stranger. A new text message arrived. "You just checked the tile, didn't you?" Lena's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. The man in the polo shirt was playing a game of cat and mouse, and she was the mouse, trapped in her own home. She had to fight back. She had to take back control. She ran out the back door, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. She would not communicate with him on his terms. She would not be his pawn. She would be an invisible player, a ghost. She scaled the fence that separated her yard from his. The hedge was thick and unforgiving, but she was fast and determined. She was going to find out who he was and what he wanted. She dropped silently into his yard, her bare feet silent on the manicured lawn. The yard was beautiful, pristine, and eerily quiet. There were no lights on in the house. The man in the polo shirt was gone, but he had left something for her. A single, crisp piece of paper held down by a small rock was sitting on his patio table. The paper had a single line of text, a line that changed everything. "They're not the uninvited guests, Lena. They're just the bait. Your ex-husband is the one who wanted your pool." The words on the paper were a gut punch, a simple, stark line of text that reset the entire world Lena had just rebuilt. "They're not the uninvited guests, Lena. They're just the bait. Your ex-husband is the one who wanted your pool." The paper, held down by a smooth river stone, seemed to hum with malevolent energy. Her ex-husband, Mark, the man who had walked away with half her savings, her dignity, and a sneer. The one she had spent a year trying to erase from her life, from her memory. Now here he was, reaching out from the shadows, his ghost haunting her backyard. But the question wasn't just why he wanted the pool, but how he was doing it. And who was this man in the polo shirt? Was he an accomplice, a hired gun, or something far more complex? A cold, hard fury replaced her fear. The Thompsons were not the main event. They were a clumsy, obnoxious distraction, a pawn in a game she hadn't even known she was playing. All her triumphs, the blue-stained skin, the humiliated online presence, the ruined rug, were meaningless. She had been dancing to Mark's tune, reacting to a setup he had meticulously designed. Her revenge, which she had thought was a brilliant act of retaliation, was nothing more than a predictable, choreographed response. She snatched the paper, her hands trembling not from fear, but from a cold, quiet rage. She didn't scale the fence this time. She vaulted it, her feet landing with a soft thud on her own lawn. She didn't look back at the neighbor's yard. Her focus was now a laser beam of pure, undiluted intent. She had to find out. She had to know. She sprinted to her office, the humming servers a promise of answers. She pulled up the digital logs she had already scoured, but this time she wasn't looking for a breach. She was looking for a pattern, a trail that led back to Mark. She ran a deep diagnostic, an advanced scan that went beyond simple anomalies, searching for a ghost in her machine she had never looked for before. Minutes turned into a fevered half-hour. The logs were clean. Her system was airtight. The man in the polo shirt had not left a single digital fingerprint. It was impossible. She was a master of her craft. She knew what she was looking for. There had to be a trace, a forgotten byte of code, an encrypted message, something. A new text message chimed on her phone, which she had left on the kitchen counter. She ignored it. She would not be his puppet. Her eyes darted from screen to screen, a cascade of green and white code flashing across her monitors. There was nothing. It was as if he had never been there. The only evidence was the slip of paper in her hand, a physical message in a digital war. She let out a frustrated scream, a low, guttural sound of pure helplessness. He wasn't playing by her rules. He was using a different game board, a different set of pieces. Her gaze fell on the ceramic garden gnome, the one she had had since she was a child. It sat on her desk now, a small, chipped ceramic figure caked with dry beer foam. The sight of it, a tangible reminder of the Thompsons' careless destruction, sent another wave of fury through her. This little gnome, a symbol of her quiet, simple happiness, had been defiled. She reached for it, her fingers wrapping around its cold ceramic form. A small, almost imperceptible line caught her eye. It wasn't a crack from the fall. It was a hairline fracture in the dried foam. She picked at it, her fingers prying at the hardened suds. It wasn't just foam. It was a tiny piece of plastic, a chip that was not part of the gnome. She picked it out, her fingers clumsy with anticipation. It was a microchip, no bigger than a grain of rice, cleverly disguised and embedded in the gnome itself. She held it to the light, her mind racing. It was a tracker. A GPS tracker, but why? Mark knew where she lived. He didn't need to track her to her own house. He had been here 1,000 times. She ran the chip's ID through her database, a private network of known black market and military-grade surveillance tech. The results came back instantly, a chilling stream of data. The chip was not a simple tracker. It was a high-end, military-grade communication device, a two-way comms link that could not only transmit location, but could also broadcast a signal that could be used to remotely activate other devices. The kind of signal that could activate something like, say, an ultrasonic dye in a swimming pool. A new realization dawned on her, a cold, sickening wave that washed over her. This wasn't about the pool itself. It was about what was in the pool. Her mind flashed back to the day she had refilled the pool after the divorce, a symbolic act of renewal. The Thompsons had been here that day, too, playing on the edge of the fence, their obnoxious laughter a familiar sound. She had thought nothing of it. But Mark, with his meticulous, calculating mind, would have noticed. He would have known this was the perfect time to plant something in her pool. But what? Her eyes darted to the pool, its waters a sickeningly vibrant blue. He had put something in her pool. The Thompsons had been the delivery system. The uninvited guests were the bait, the distraction. She had been so focused on them, on her clever digital revenge, she had missed the real threat. She had been so busy playing a game of chess, she didn't realize he had just set up a bomb. The gnome, once a symbol of her quiet, simple life, was now a piece of Mark's twisted game. She looked down at the chip, the microscopic circuit board a testament to Mark's insidious planning. He wasn't just a vengeful ex-husband. He was a strategic mastermind. A new text message chimed. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over.